Now, if you're moving to Iowa, you're probably curious how cold it's going to get here in Iowa. Well, you're going to want to stick around to the end of the video as I will cover that. But first, we want to cover the winter survival tips to survive those cold temperatures that we will talk about. Now, if you're moving to Iowa, the very first thing you're going to want to think about when it comes to Iowa winters is your attire. Yes, it's super important and it's not for fashion. You want to get attire that is suitable for the winter conditions that we see. So what things do I recommend? Well, the very first thing you're going to want to get is a nice coat. You want something that's nice and thick and has a waterproof outer shell for times like right now where we're getting snow. The snow will melt on your coat, and if you get something that isn't waterproof on the outside, that water will seep right in, making you even colder than if you didn't have the coat on. So you want to make sure that you get a good coat. Some good brands to look at are brands like North Face or Columbia, but there are so many different brands out there that can do the job, and I highly recommend getting that right away. Don't be like a good friend of mine. He moved here from Nigeria, and when he moved here, he just had a little windbreaker and thought that was going to be sufficient. He never experienced winter and cold temperatures, so understandably, he did think it was sufficient, but it definitely was not sufficient. When he got here, he came out of the airport and thought it was crazy that anybody would live here because the air hurt his face. Yes, that is literally what he said when he stepped out of the airport. So, first things first, get that winter coat. Second thing you want to do is get a good pair of boots. What is a good pair of boots? Well, a good pair of boots is something that's going to obviously keep you warm. And again, you want something that can be waterproof. So if you're walking through the snow and it's melting, it's not getting inside, because if it gets inside, you're going to be even colder than if it was out, because that water will freeze or get closer to a freezing temperature right next to your foot. And it's just not a good combination to have. And then thirdly, you're going to want to get yourself a good pair of mittens or gloves. Now, when we're talking warm, mittens are going to be a warmer option for you. Reason being is with gloves, you have individual little finger spots, and each of those are good, but they don't hold a lot of warm air around them. Where with a mitten, it's all one case, and the warm air is going to stay inside, keeping your hands a little bit warmer. So if you're just going for warmth, mittens are a great option, but they're a little bit hard to use in how tactile they'll be. You can't mess with your phone. You can't do a lot of gripping and grabbing. So if you're good with just a little bit of cold, maybe look at some decent gloves, and they can do the job very sufficiently as well. So you want to look at both options and decide which one is better for you if you want to survive an Iowa winter. Now, another piece of quote unquote clothing that you can get that isn't 100% necessary, but is super beneficial if you're going to do any kind of walking outside, and it pertains to ice and snow for the most part, but it is cleats that you can attach to the bottom of your boot. Highly recommend it if you're going to be outside, because you don't want to be slipping and sliding all over the place, and the cleats will help you out with that. There's a lot of different models that you can choose from, so take a look and see what fits you the best. Now, when we get winter storms here in Iowa, sometimes they can be pretty crazy. In fact, we're getting one right now. We're expected to get between 6 and 12 inches of snow. Right now, we're probably sitting at about 4 inches, but when we get those massive amounts of snow, sometimes you can't leave your house to go get food and supplies. So tip number 2 is before the winter storms hit, make sure you're stocked up on food and supplies, because you never know when you're not going to be able to get out and get some of those things. So get things like canned products that will last a little while just in case. Get things that are prepackaged like noodles, stuff like that. Maybe not always the healthiest option, but at least you know it will last and that you will be able to be in your home for an extended period of time. Now, does it happen that often that we cannot get out completely? No, it's not very common, but you don't want to be that one time where you don't have that supplies in place and not be able to get anything. Make sure you're planning ahead when it comes to wintertime in Iowa. Get your supplies before you need it. Now, tip number 3 has to do with what you're doing before the winter hits and during the winter, and that is maintaining your heating system, whatever it is in your home. It could be natural gas, electric heat, it could be any sorts of radiated heat, anything like that. You want to make sure that is maintained and ready to go for when we get those cold temperatures, because You don't want to be stuck in a home where it's not working and all the service people cannot get to you because everybody else's HVAC systems have gone down. It's going to get really cold really quick, and you don't want to have to be wearing that winter coat that you bought in your home. That's meant for outdoors, so make sure you are maintaining all of your equipment in the home before the winter hits, just so you don't have to worry about that when it does actually get here. Now, these are just a few tips that I give out to my clients if they are moving to the area. And if you want more tips or advice on where to live, what it looks like to live here, give me a call. I am a licensed realtor here in Iowa, and I would love to help you out no matter where you decide to live. Now, my next expert tip is to stay informed about what the winter is going to do. For example, this winter storm that we're having right now was predicted over a week ago, so it will give you time to prepare the supplies that you need to get. But you need to be paying attention to the weather in order to have that preparation time beforehand, because again, you don't want to be stuck without that furnace, without the clothes, without that food supply. Make sure you're staying up to date and informed on what the weather looks like in the wintertime specifically, because winter can be a rough season. Now, when it comes to getting around in the winter season, do you need a 4x4 or a 4-wheel drive? Well, honest answer is probably not. Now, it does depend on if you're living in rural areas versus cities, but generally you can get around with a 2-wheel drive vehicle. Now, if you're deciding to go with the 2-wheel drive vehicle, the one thing that you want to make sure of though is that your tires are good to go, because if your tires are a little bit on the bald side, you're not going to be able to get very far. I myself drive a Toyota Corolla, which is a smaller 2-wheel drive vehicle. I can get around pretty much anywhere I need to go, but my tires are very good. Now, you don't necessarily need to get winter tires. They are a great option because they have little metal studs in this tire that gives you a little bit more grip, but I just have an all-season tire, and it does generally well in all the seasons, like the name would state. But again, you want to make sure those are good to go. When you go in an oil change, rotate your tires, make sure the tread is thick enough to handle winter driving so that you don't get in a situation where you're slipping and sliding, because trust me, it is not a fun experience. I've done it before. But what do you want to keep in your car when driving around? Even if you do have good tires, there's still a possibility that you could become into a wreck. I hope that doesn't happen, but you still want to be prepared if it does happen. So things that you want to be having in your car is what I call a car shovel. It's usually a smaller shovel that you can throw in the back and get yourself out of situations by digging up the snow that's around the tires and driving out of it. Other things is an extra pair of clothes that is warm in case you didn't have the coat when you left the home. You have extra clothes to possibly stay the night in the car if it's that bad of a situation. You want extra food and water. And then one that you may not think about is throw some kitty litter in the back of your car. Yeah, it sounds a little bit weird, but the reasoning being is that if you get in a bind, you can dump a little kitty litter at the tire's base, and that provides a little bit more traction to potentially get you out of the situation that you're in. So one little hot tip that you may not think about is throw that kitty litter in the back, but you want to make sure you have all the other stuff in the back as well, because if the situation arises, you're going to want to make sure you have the extra supplies right in the car. Now, obviously, we have talked a lot about preparing for the winter when it comes to your physical needs, but what about your mental needs? Winter is a long and a lot of times dark season, and it can drain you mentally, especially if you're not getting out. So one hot tip for you is to get out of the home as much as possible and get into nature. Yes, it's cold. Yes, there's a lot of snow, but it's still good to get out, get some sunlight on you, and break that cycle of the wintertime blues that you may experience if you're staying in the home all the time. You're gonna move here, you're gonna be a little tougher, you're gonna understand that you can get out into some of these cold temperatures, and it's gonna be just fine. So tip is get out, enjoy the winter, go do some activities. So what kind of activities can you get out and do? Well, you can go out and go for a walk. It's a great activity to do during winter. I do it all the time. I take my dog. Granted, if it gets really cold, I don't take her, but it's really great to get out and just do a walk. But there's activities all over. Go to ice sculpting events, go to a brewery, get out, enjoy the winter weather as much as possible so that you don't have those wintertime blues that can definitely show up if you just stay in your home all winter long. Now, if you're moving to Iowa, one thing you want to be prepared for is salt. And it's not just for dinner. Yes, if you're moving to Iowa, we use salt all the time, but how do we use it? Well, salt goes down onto winter roads. And the reason that salt goes onto winter roads is it makes driving a lot more safe. Salt lowers the temperature of the ice and snow and allows it to melt off. So you will see a lot of snow plows putting salt down everywhere, and a lot of times it's mixed with sand just to increase that grip for people driving around. So you're going to see a lot of salt everywhere. But even if it's not just on the roads, I highly recommend getting yourself a bag of salt that they sell all over the place to sprinkle out onto your sidewalks, because it will make walking up and down your sidewalk a lot safer as well, because it will get that snow off there. You'll still have to scoop, but getting that salt on the sidewalk is going to make it a lot easier to get up and get out of the way. So be prepared for the salt if you're moving to Iowa. Now, if you're not from a northern area and you move to Iowa and you're here during the winter, be prepared to talk to people about the winter. You will hear all the time, hey, what's your first winter like? How are you surviving winter? All of those things come up, and I am guilty of it as well. We just like talking about winter, and we think we are the toughest around when it comes to winter. So if somebody comes up from a warmer state, we're just asking because we're curious what your experience is when it comes to the winter time. But even if you are from a northern state, be prepared to talk about winter, because that's what we talk about, is the weather around here. All those questions come up all the time, and it's just to have small talk. So be ready for it, because it's coming and you can't do much about it. Now, the thing about winter in Iowa is that it's really only one of our seasons. Yes, it's probably the most talked about season when it comes to moving here, because people are worried about the temperatures, but you gotta remember it's just one of our 4 seasons. Spring is right around the corner. It is going to get warmer, and you'll be able to survive, especially if you use all of these tips to survive. Just remember that winter is not forever. Did you think I forgot to tell you how cold Iowa winters get? Well, if you're staying around to the end of the video, of course I'm gonna reward you. So how cold does Iowa winters get? They can get down into the negatives, and I've seen temperatures as far as negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but that's not very typical. It's only happened one time, and I've lived here my whole life. Typically, you're probably gonna see the teens up into the 30s, but yes, we do get those super, super cold temperatures down below 0. So be ready for all of it. And if you move here, you're probably gonna see all of it. But I hope you decide to move here. And if you do, and you want some help on where to live, give me a call, give me a text. I would love to help you out on any questions that you might have. But if you just wanna see another video, well, check out this one right here.